So this is a session that I've really been looking forward to for the last week. I caught up with Phil about this time last week, midweek, I think. We chatted about his run at Dead Cow Gully, where, as everybody knows, he broke the world record running 102 hours in the backyard format, which was just amazing. And it was just wonderful to have one of the team achieve something like that, and it was wonderful to watch it from afar. It was just such a good run in so many ways. So I first came across Phil pretty well exactly 4 years ago when Sean had this ridiculous idea of running 24 park runs in 24 hours, and he'd managed to con a couple of people to go and run it with him, Phil being one. And Phil was the only one who actually managed to achieve the feat. I think Sean actually ran every 24, but running under 25 minutes started to become an issue. And I was thinking about it today, like that's not too far away from the backyard format, Phil.
Yeah, it's very similar, and that's kind of what drew me to the backyard to start with. Um, and even like before I'd done the 24 park runs, because I think the first one we did was in 2018, so that was before I'd even done anything longer than the 6-inch, which is 47 Ks. And to me, it wasn't running an ultra; it was just I'm doing 24 5K runs. So just breaking it down like that just made it mentally a lot easier, because I'd done the 7 park runs for a few years, and then there was a 16 park runs, and I really enjoyed them. And to me, it was never an ultra. It was just I'm going out and I'm doing 24 different 5K runs in the one day. Um, so yeah, and that's kind of when I heard about this backyard ultra, I'm like, oh, it's only a little bit longer than 5Ks each lap. So I know I can probably get to about 24 hours, and let's just see how long I can keep going after that.
Yeah, because that park run thing with that was pretty difficult, because having to drive between locations, and some of those drives were sort of 20 minutes to half
Yeah.
an hour as well, So
Well, yeah, fortunately, I didn't have to do any of the driving myself. It was great having people chauffeur us around. And for me, that time in the car, that was just what I could use to pretty much like the break in the backyard. I'm using that to eat or to change my shoes, put sunscreen on, stuff like that. And I don't think, like for me, it's not long enough to kind of seize up. Um, it was sort of just enough time to recover and then, get into the next one. I think
yeah,
the hardest ones were the ones where they were closer together and I didn't feel like I got enough rest.
right, yeah, yeah. So that performance certainly impressed me, and then quite soon after that, you ran 12 hours. I think it was at Lighthorse, and you ran
Yeah.
125 Ks there. And I think that performance as an ultra run, a real ultra, I think really started to show your class. And then 12 months later, in 2020, you ran your first backyard at Birdies.
Yeah. It was about 18 months later, but yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah. So there was nothing between Light Horse and Birdies. I finished Light Horse, and I was kind of like, oh, I might be kind of all right at this ultra running thing, but I didn't really get bitten by the bug, so to say. But then there was kind of COVID and all of that happened as well, so there weren't many events on anyway. But then yeah, kind of the first one back after COVID was Birdies, and that just really appealed to me because I'm not signing up for a 100-mile race or a 200-mile race. I'm just signing up for 6.7 Ks, and I'm just seeing how long I can keep doing that for. Because that was still when I was still pretty passionate about, the 5K distance and, doing the fast park runs and all that. So for me, it wasn't like a huge step out of my comfort zone to sign up for this ultra because yeah, it's just 6.7 Ks and you just keep going.
Yeah. And at that first one at Birdies, you were the assist.
Yeah,
Yeah, that was to Michael Hooker, right?
yeah, that's correct.
Yeah. And you ran 40,
Yeah, I did 39 and he did 40.
39. Okay,
Yeah.
cool. And since then, you've run 8 further backyard ultras and won all of them.
Yeah, so yeah, so 9 altogether.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's amazing. Tell me about that progression, how that went.
Yeah, so the first one I kind of just went in with no idea at all, like no plan. I was literally sitting up the night before, like just before I went to bed, just writing down like paces on a bit of paper, working out, how much of it can I run, how much can I walk, and trying to like come up with some sort of strategy. And then I was just like, I'm going to be doing a few of these laps, so I'll just make it up as I go along. Um, yeah, I took a lot of food with me, but I never really had a plan of what I was going to eat and when. Um, but I had a notebook and I thought maybe let's just keep a track of what I'm doing here and kind of just wrote notes as I went. Um, and yeah, like that one is like, because I've done the 24-hour park run, I thought, well, I know I can get to 24 hours. I'll just push through, like not worrying about sleep or anything. I know I can go 24 hours without sleep. And I'll get to 24 hours and then I'll, see how much longer I can hang on. And then I was kind of a bit surprised at how few people got to 24 hours because there was a lot of people that I knew had done, huge distances in other ultra runs and, were quite renowned in the ultra running community. And I think there was only 8 or there was definitely less than 10 that year. And then so I'm sitting around thinking, oh, like I'm a top 10 here. And I wasn't kind of expecting that and just kept hanging on a few more laps and yeah by about I think just before lap 30 I think John made it to lap 31. I can't remember exactly, but I was like just before he dropped out I was like surprised. I'm like, wow, I'm in the top 3 here. And then like I knew that John had just recently or he'd run Delirious earlier, and so I just, thought of him as he was like one of the favorites and he was a really decent ultra runner. And so when he dropped out, I'm like, I kind of had a bit of imposter syndrome. Like, what am I doing here? Why am I the second last one standing? And or one of the last 2 standing. And then yeah, I just kind of hung in there for as long as I could. But yeah, Hooker just kind of looked very strong and I was struggling. And then I had issues with my ankle and Susan from the long run kind of looked at it and strapped it up a bit, and that got me through a few more laps. And yeah, it got to that time of night, like 1 o'clock in the morning, struggling with my leg. And I've kind of noticed since I've been watching a lot of backyard since that sort of 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock in the morning is a common time for the assist to kind of just stop because it's that time of night and you're thinking, I don't know if I can just hang on all the way till morning. And yeah, so a lot of different factors into play anyway, but I felt like I'd given it my all at the time, but then I always look back and think, you know what, maybe I could have done another lap. But it just, if anything, like it just gave me the drive to just want to really excel at the format and get better at it. Um, so yeah, I kind of just yeah, knew Hurdies was coming up after that, so I kind of just put all my energy and focus into doing that one really well. And I really analyzed how I went in birdies and what I could change. And um, like I still didn't really consider myself like one of the top ultra runners in WA, because I was still really just that guy that was fast at the 5K. So I thought, well, where can I improve in other areas? And that's when I kind of looked at all my organization and strategy and planning and all of that, because I'm like, I don't need to be able to run fast. As long as I can do the laps in under an hour, then I'm good. And I just kind of devised a strategy of like 3 different pace groups and Yeah, worked out, you know, if I want to go far, I got to quit sleeping there. So I worked on a sleep strategy and um, yeah, so Herdes was the next one and had all of that sort of planning in place. And we all know how that went down with me and Kev. I was quite surprised when it got to 34 laps and, you know, Michael Hooker, who'd won Verdes, he'd dropped out at that point. Margie Hadley, who's another really strong runner, had dropped out. And, you know, just turned around and it was just me and Kev. And I'd had earlier conversations with Kev and he was talking about getting to 36. I think he just wanted to beat John initially.
Yeah, that'd be
John
right.
Penzie, who'd done 31. And he's like, I'll make it 36. But then, like, when it was just down to us two, he's like, he knew that I'd been talking about getting to the Australian record, but it was never like, I have to get there. It was just like, you know, it'll be nice to have as a um, sort of a thing to reach for. And so, but I think he kind of felt like, oh, I really got to work here to help get to the record because there's no one else left. Um, but yeah, the whole time that he kept going, I was like thinking every lap was going to be his last. And he'd even tell me when we were out there, he's like, "Oh, I don't think I can do any more, Phil. I'm really sorry I can't get you the record." I'm like, "Oh, you know, that's all right if you want to drop out." Like secretly, I'm thinking just drop out because then I can do just one more lap and I can finish. And I wasn't even caring about the record, but I kind of got in the mindset of like every lap I thought it was going to be my last, and that kind of became a bit detrimental. And it was probably like one or two laps before, and I'm just like, I just kind of flipped a switch, and it's like, I just can't listen to what Kev's saying. Like, I just got to treat every lap as if, you know, it's going to keep going. So I started thinking two more laps ahead instead of just that one more lap. And then, yeah, to Kev's credit, he got us all the way to 47 before deciding to tap out, so I could go on and do the 200 mile. And yeah, that was a great experience. I didn't really know Kev too well before that, but it just became this great bonding experience. And yeah, just ever since then, I've just loved running with him at races. And even though there wasn't really like there were a lot of laps there where we're just kind of running next to each other, but there wasn't a lot of chatter going on. We're just kind of suffering through it together, and we just kind of built this kind of camaraderie. And yeah, so that was Herdes, and then yeah, so that kind of showed me that the planning and the organization, like all of those systems that I put in place worked. But there was still room to refine that and tweak it. And so pretty much every backyard I've done since then, it's just been like a copy paste of the previous plan. And then I've gone through and kind of modified it, even just to the layout of how it looks, so it's easier for my crew to follow and things like that. So um yeah, there's definitely every backyard I've done, I've learned something and been able to change something and yeah, get it to the point where like Hurdy's just gone back in March. I think everything went really well, and I was probably just starting to hit my stride, like getting into that third night. But at the same time, it's like I could, you know, kind of got a sense of the event dying down, so I never really got to test, you know, the like I had more strategy to sort of implement from the third night onwards, but I just never really got around to that. But everything up to that point went really well, and I felt really good afterwards. And so I pretty much like my plan from Hurdy's to the Backyard Masters didn't change a lot at all because everything had just worked so well. I just wanted to kind of replicate that. Um, but yeah, just going into the Backyard Masters, I just thought, well, this is a chance for me to kind of really go through that third night, possibly fourth night, and just see how I go just following that plan. So
I think
um,
I think um, having the ability or the opportunity to run well 8 backyards before the Masters, as you say, like it just gave you this amazing learning opportunity right through.
yeah,
Um,
yeah,
and you know, like I saw you run a number of those, and I think you'd agree. There's no way in some of those earlier ones, you would have got to 102 no matter what your
Yeah,
assist was doing,
yeah, no way. And also just my concept of what is a long way has changed. Like at that, back when the Australian record was 46 yards, and I thought, is that possible to reach? And now it's like, I go into a backyard, and that first 48 hours, that's barely even the warm up. It's, you know, when I start getting into the 60s and 70s, I feel like that's when it's starting to hit my stride and stuff. So,
Yeah. I
um,
said, I
yeah,
said, I said to Shireen after a great run at Canberra to qualify for the Australian team, that so much comes from experience. And I know Shireen hasn't had the opportunity to run a great number of 24s yet. But I think your experience really highlights that. It's having the ability to do it again and again and again, and
yeah,
learn is just so important.
yeah. I used to be very focused on what other people were doing around me as well. Like, as you start to get towards the pointy end, I'm, monitoring everyone. Oh, do they look like they're only got a few more laps left, or do they look like they can keep going? And you start trying to calculate, oh, this has probably only got like 5 more laps left in it, or any of that. But now I'm at the stage where I just have a lot more like trust and faith in my own abilities, that what anyone else is doing, it doesn't matter. Like, they can be looking really strong, but I know, like, I'll just keep following my plan, and I'll outlast them eventually. And the same the other way. If they're looking like they're struggling, not to sort of get caught up in the idea that the event could be over soon, because someone can be struggling for 10 or 20 laps before they drop out. Like, I did the same thing at Satellite Champs. I started struggling around the lap 65, but then I was still somehow able to hang on for the win at 76. But yeah, just having that experience and just having that faith in my own abilities has, I think, helps me mentally just not get caught up in everything else that's happening.
Yeah. Um, I think backyards especially, running is only part of it. And you said it yourself just before when you said you don't need to be a fast runner um, at backyards. I'd hate to put a percentage on it, but there are plenty of people who run well.
Yeah,
But there are so many other components, and over time, I think you've just finessed those other components better than anybody has. And I'm talking sort of nutrition, crew, sleep. Like, the process is immaculate, and the mindset. And people talk about 1%ers. I think they're 15%ers for you. Would you agree?
yeah, definitely. And I think it just started out with those little 1%ers, like, swapping out my shoelaces for elastic laces. And I just thought, every little thing that I can change to make it easier on race day, let's just focus on that. Because all of those little things will add up. But then, yeah, when you get into like the sleep and the nutrition, I think that counts for a lot more, because if you're getting your sleep and your nutrition right, then you're not getting into that state of delirium as as early as everyone else, or at all. Um, and yeah, it just counts for so much. Um, Like, the running's the easy bit. Like, I run every day. That's just, that's what I do. Um, but yeah, it's just getting all those other things right. And um, yeah, it just becomes sort of like, you get into a routine, and your crew gets into a routine, and you come in and you know exactly what needs to happen. You don't need to think about it on race day, because it's all written down. Um, so yeah, it's just, I think there was a quote somewhere, I can't remember where it was, or it was something about like 90% of the race is decided before race day. Like you just need to line up and at the start line and execute it. And I think that's so true. It's like everything, all the planning and the training and all that you put in when you're at that start line, like it's already like 90% decided of what's going to happen.
Well, with Mind Focus Running, we concentrate on mindset. Tell us how that's progressed in the last couple of years since you joined the team.
Yeah, well, so as I said, just before, I think that the biggest thing for me is, yeah, just having that faith in my abilities, and not getting caught up in what other people are doing. So I'm just very like, I can kind of just tune in to like how my body's feeling, how my mind's feeling, and just sort of more embracing the experience. And I think the backyard is a very good example of a race where you don't have to think about the overall goal. You can think about the present moment. And a lot of the time, I'm just thinking, like, I might think a few laps ahead, but really it's just I'll come in and just think about what I need to do in that break and then, plan for the next lap and what I'm doing in the next break. So it's very easy in the backyards not to get caught up in the bigger picture and worry about all your goals and all that. And just, yeah, you can focus on the here and now. And yeah, when you're out on the laps, because you're not stressing about running a certain speed or anything like that, you can talk with other people, you can make the experience enjoyable. Yeah, you can make it social, and yeah, just appreciate more the stuff around you. So like I compare that to like Delirious, and Delirious started the 100 mile, and it's a stunning course. Like some of those viewpoints where you can see the beach, like especially where the aid stations are. I could just stand there and like look out there all day, but the competitive side of me is just like, well, I can't stop for too long because I'm wasting time here. So, you just want to keep moving. But whereas with the backyard, you can kind of embrace that a bit more. Especially for me, like I really found myself just immersing myself in the moment on that last lap when I knew it was my last one and I was on my own and I was running around and I wasn't in a particular rush to get back. And I was just like, this is the last time I'm going to be running this loop. This is the world record number loop. And I was just kind of looking around me and I was just like, I've been on this course for like 4 days. And well, I was actually going into the fifth day. And I wasn't sick of it. I could still like look around and see the beauty in the course, and even just like these cows that are there. Like on day one, they were like a bit skittish, but now they're kind of coming up to the fence because they're not. They know what's going on. They've just been so accustomed to us running around the course, and yeah, they're not startled by it or anything. And yeah, it was just a great lap. And coming back in, like there was a point about 1K before the end where it kind of came near the finish line, and people could come out there and wave and cheer on, and it was just like running that. It felt like when they do the marathon at the Olympics and they come in and then they do that last lap of the 400-meter track, and it kind of felt a bit like that, like just that last kilometer, just coming in and everyone can see and cheer you on. And yeah, it's just a surreal experience.
Right. And how's the meditation been going?
I've probably like I definitely don't do it as much as when we first started working together. But I'm definitely doing it out there when I'm on the course. Not so much in the early days when there's a lot of people to talk to and stuff, but towards the end, and even when the field, there still could be like 10 or 15 people left, but because I'm very sort of sticking to my pace, and a lot of the times I will be out the front on my own. So in that sort of solitude, that's when I kind of go into that meditation, and a lot of it will be the look, listen, feel, and yeah, just like I didn't use headphones at all. Sorry, there were 2 laps where I took headphones out. And I started listening to an audiobook, but I was just like, you know what, I don't, I'm not paying attention to this. I don't need this audiobook. And yeah, just yeah, had a lot of that meditation when I was out there on my own.
All right.
And
Sorry, you didn't you weren't using audio books at all?
2 laps I took it out on,
Far out.
and then I was just like, you know what, I'm not really um like it was a good book, but I don't know, I couldn't kind of get stuck into it.
Yeah.
Um, and I'm just like, you know what, I don't really need it. I wasn't struggling with, trying to pass the time or needing distractions, or anything like that. And I found that actually a lot with a lot of my races lately is I won't take the headphones. Yeah, a lot of it will just be kind of immersing myself in the moment and going through the
Yeah.
look, listen, feel. Um, and yeah, I think I used it a bit at Light Horse, but it wasn't for the whole time. I think it was probably for like the first 3 hours during the dark. Um, but
Yeah.
yeah, even though I'll take my um every single training run, like I can't leave the house without my headphones. But
Mm.
when it comes to a race, I don't know, I'm just more about being immersed in the race, I guess, and
Yeah.
just enjoying the time out there.
Yeah. I think that's great, and yeah, I think the meditations definitely had a role to play there to
Yeah,
get you to that sort of level.
yeah.
Yeah. What about the mindset in the sort of weeks and days leading up to the Masters, like in terms of expectations, etc.?
Yeah, so yeah, we always talk about how we talk about setting a goal, but then and writing a plan according to that goal, and then just kind of forgetting about the goal and just following the process. Like I'm not even setting goals anymore for backyards. For me, it's like my well, I'm not setting a time or a distance goal. My goal is to stay in the event for as long as possible. So, if the event goes for 48 hours, then, I hope to be there to the end of that 48 hours or 102 hours, whatever it is. And that's kind of my mindset going into it is it doesn't matter if I'm going to run 24 hours or run 102 hours. My plan is exactly the same. My first 24 hours, if it was a 24-hour backyard, those 24 hours they're exactly the same as the first 24 hours as if I'm running 102. And yeah, so I, I'm finding it easy to go into these events not having any sort of expectation on myself other than to go into it to just do my best and stay in for as long as possible. So I'm not, to get the world record, yes, that's written on my plan. That's a milestone, and I'm thinking that will be really cool to get to. And I know that there's people there that can help push me to that, but it's not like do or die. It's not like all my energy is just focused on getting to that goal. Because you kind of have to think beyond that because yeah, you see in backyards all the time, people are like, oh, I just want to get to 24, but if I can keep going after that, then I will. And they get to 24 and then they're like, oh, you know what? I can probably tap out now because, I said I wanted to get to 24 and I've done that. Um, so yeah, for me, with my mindset going into it, it's just, yeah, just the goal is to just stay in as long as possible. And that, yeah. So I find myself like the weeks and days leading up to it, I find myself sleeping really easily. Like I always try to get extra sleep. Like I'll increase it from like 8 hours to 10 hours and, try and get an afternoon nap in there. And even like the night before, like if it's a night before, um, like say like a 50K or a 100 mile or even a 12 or 24 hour, because there's a lot more pressure to do well for that whole time that you're racing. I find it a bit harder to sleep. But with the backyard, it's like, oh, I'm just going to go to sleep. And when I wake up, I'm going to do my warm up for a few days before I get into the race. So there's not even any pressure in those early laps to kind of disrupt my sleep pattern and all of that. I can just kind of fall asleep really easily.
Yeah. Look, I think that's that's absolutely the perfect mindset going into it. And from what I've sort of seen and read, it's not necessarily the approach of everybody. Hey, you know, I think there are other runners out there who certainly are a lot more performance focused, and obviously that works for some.
Yeah.
I was during Wednesday or Tuesday evening and very early Wednesday morning, on that, or getting into the fourth day, I was messaging Gemma and having little conversations backwards and forwards. And there was a point at about 90 hours, and I think it was around when Harvey dropped, and Gemma said Phil seemed 100% fine until a small bit of negativity came in at about 90 hours. He said to me, "It's taken 4 days for me to feel like this," and we had a bit of a laugh. That's one hell of an achievement. Like 90 hours before you
Yeah.
started sort of, getting inklings of negative thought.
I'm trying to think what that was, because I know I had a bit of a negative patch around 96 and 97. I can't think what it was around 90, but
Yeah. Well, at about 95, Gemma said he keeps getting ahead of himself and talking about later today. So I just remind him about staying in the moment. And
yeah.
like I can imagine at 95 to try and keep the mind away from the world record would have started to become
Yes. So
pretty nigh on
uh,
impossible by that stage.
I wasn't actually really thinking about the world record until like a few laps before. And then yeah, lap 98 he came in and difficulty breathing and struggling, and then yeah, that's when I yeah, I had a better idea then that yeah, he's probably done here, but he's still got another. Even at that point, I wasn't thinking about the record. I'm like, well, he's done now. I'll just go do lap 99. And I was very surprised when he came in and lined up again. But then I'm like, well, if you're okay to continue, then let's do this. I'll drop back and I'll walk with you. Make sure you're not going to collapse and die, and we'll take a lap at a time. And yeah, it really wasn't until kind of we're walking 101 together, and I'm like, well, looks like I can get him through this lap, and then I can go do 102 on my own. That's
Mm.
probably the point I started thinking about getting the record.
Yeah. We had a chat, I think it was the Monday before the event, and I sort of talked about applying kindness to the race, and Gemma was sharing videos of the start of some of the yards, and she posted one of that lap. I think it was 98, and you were standing there yourself, and Sam wasn't there yet, and I heard you say, "Is he safe to start?" And I thought that was such a wonderful thing, like obviously you needed him there to go on to break the record, but to be more concerned about his safety at that stage I thought was just a really good thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, as I said, like I wasn't even thinking about the record at that point. Well, obviously it's like in the back of my mind, but I'm not going to do whatever it takes to get there. And at that point, to try and get Sam through another 3 laps kind of seemed like it would be a big ask. So I didn't want to drag him around just to like try and help me out to get there if it was going to be detrimental to his health.
Yeah, yeah, no, I thought that was great. Well, we've got a few new guys who've just sort of started Mind Focus running in the last couple of weeks, and they're not part of the messenger chat group yet. But yeah, I thought it was amazing. like I don't think anybody got a lot of work done that Wednesday morning. Just totally focused, and we were chatting away in the messenger. But I always have to watch what I'm saying in there because I know that you're reading them either between laps or even during
Yeah.
laps.
Yeah. Well, I try to sometimes, but I think in the early days I've got a bit more time and, thinking a bit more clearly and I can sit down and go through the phone. But in the later stages, sometimes I just want to get in and kind of shut off. But yeah, occasionally I'll pick it up or, I might not be going, you might send a message through at the right time. Like I'll be there on my break and I'll see my phone light up and I'll be like, oh, let's check what this message is. But it's not like I'll come in from the break and, try to go back through everything I've missed in the last 45 minutes. So
Sure.
yeah, I saw some of them. But at the end of the event, probably like 2 days later, actually, I kind of went back and I scrolled back through. I had to scroll back a while. But yeah, it was really yeah, thanks for all the support and messages, guys. Like I didn't read them all until after the event, but it was nice to know that you're all thinking of me and following along back home. So thank you.
Yeah. Um, it was, I think it was just really exciting for everyone and single one of us to sort of, feel like we were playing a little part in it. It was great.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
think I gave my phone to Jem a couple of times and said to reply to some of the messages. So if there were some replies in there, they might have been from Jem. But yeah, there were some from myself as well. But um yeah, sometimes it's just easier to give the phone to Jem and say, just reply to this thing and let him know what's going on.
Yeah, no, terrific. Um, what's the mind been like since the event? Like there must have been, well, like I know there's been lots of attention. You've gone and done some
Yeah, it was a
news
bit
sheets.
overwhelming. It was a bit overwhelming for like the first probably 3 or 4 days. Like literally, I'd have like 20 notifications on my phone and I'd try to respond to them. And I put my phone down and half an hour later I pick it up and there's like another 20 messages. And it was just I couldn't keep up with them all and I just kind of cherry picked the ones that like to respond to. Or, sometimes there'll be ones I wanted to respond to, but then by the time I got around to it, I'd forgotten about it or had been lost in a sea of messages. So it was very overwhelming. Um, I even just had to turn down a few interviews because yeah, like every sort of radio station and TV and podcast wanted to get in touch with me. So I just yes, some of them I just never ended up replying to or just saying, too full on at the moment. Just so it's kind of nice in a way to have that attention, but at the same time, it's like I'm just trying to, recover here and get my sleep back to normal and get my eating back to normal. And yeah, it's a lot to try and sort of think about.
Yeah.
But I think, yeah, overall, I think it was nice to have that attention. It's kind of died down a bit now, but I still have a few more podcasts and stuff lined up. Yeah, it's a bit weird after the event. Like just coming back home and kind of back to reality and um like I think probably last night and the night before that they were like the first two good sleeps that I've had. Like up until then, it's I'm probably for about a week afterwards, I kept dreaming that I was on the last few laps and I'm just keep running around and I'm always on the last few laps, so I'm never finishing. Um and yeah, so I'd have to purposely like wake myself up and just get up and go for a walk to get a drink of water or something just to kind of break that cycle and get back into bed and but yeah.
Yeah. And just thinking ahead a little bit, what sort of mindset are you sort of taking into Bigs? Because, like the eyes of the world are on you now.
Yeah, but I'm not I've got the world record, but the thing with the world record in backyard ultra running is just because you can get it at one event, it doesn't mean that someone else couldn't get it if they're at that same event. Like with a marathon, for example. You could just run a marathon at any course anywhere and you could get the world record, and yes, you would be the best in the world. But there's a lot of people in different countries that haven't been tested. Like, their best might be, say, 75, but it's only at that because they haven't had that person to push him. So, and you saw that with Sam, like his best was 46 because he hadn't had the people in New Zealand to push him that far. But then you put him in a situation where he's got those other people around him and suddenly he's doubling that PB. So I'm really excited to see like all of these people that haven't tested their full potential like come together. And I reckon that, yeah, there's every chance that there could be a few more people go over that 100 mark. So yeah, I don't think, like, technically I'm going in there as number one, but by no means do I think that I am the best at this sport in the world. Like, there's just people there that haven't been tested yet. So I would kind of just go into it and, the same way I approach every backyard, because, I know that works for me. And as long as I go there and I do the best that I can do with what I have, then I'll be happy.
Yeah, fantastic. No, thanks, Phil. Yeah, that's wonderful. All right, I'll hand it over to the crew for questions. Who'd like to go first?
He's answered, Phil, you've answered everything that I was going to ask anyway. My sister sent through some questions because she was watching the whole time. And she wanted to know about your recovery. So, like, what do you do after? Like, what happens? What's the plan?
Yeah.
Do you just go to bed? Like, do you eat? What's the sitcho there?
So it depends what time of day the event finishes at. So because this one finished at around midday, I still didn't go to bed until 8 o'clock that night. So there was quite a bit of adrenaline after the event, and everyone kind of wanted to talk to me, and I was quite happy to talk to him. And yeah, we ended up we went out for dinner that night as well. So me and Harvey Lewis and Sam and John was one of the Kiwis who got into the 50s, I think, 51 maybe. And so yeah, it's just like good going out for dinner. And yeah, it wasn't until we got back, and it was probably around 8 o'clock, I went to bed. And yeah, I was just kind of on a bit of a high that whole afternoon. But yeah, went to bed, and then I just slept like rubbish, and I woke up in the middle of the night. And I had to get Jem to get me a bucket because I thought I was going to throw up. Just had like pain in my legs, and I'm like groaning in my sleep, and yeah, and as I said, it was probably about a week or so before, or probably close to 2 weeks before I started sleeping normally again. But yeah, my recovery is probably one of the weakest parts of my whole process. Like, I feel I've got the training nailed, I've got my organization, and my planning all nailed. I've got the event nailed, but when it comes to recovery, it's always like an afterthought. It's always like, I know everything I need to do to get to the event and to do the event well. And then whatever happens after that, it's like, it doesn't matter. As long as I've done the event well, then I don't care what happens after. So it is an area that I need to improve on. And I've spoken to my nutritionist about this as well. So going into Bigs, working with Gabby, there's going to be a plan for my nutrition, for my recovery after that as well, because I never really eat well. I kind of forget to drink. Like when I'm going out on the lap, it's easy. It's like, okay, on this lap, you're taking out your trail brew. When you get back, you're going to eat this. And it's all very easy to follow that plan. But it's like when I finish, it's like I just suddenly stop drinking because it's not on my plan that I need to drink. Like I don't really have a recovery plan. And yeah, I don't really have any structure to what I'm eating. It's just, I've got leftover lollies and stuff. I might eat that, but yeah, that's something that I'm working on. So hopefully I can recover a bit better after Bigs, because the plan after Bigs is to go in the 24-hour world champs, and there's only about a 5.5 week break there. So yeah, I have to see how I go with that.
That was going to be my
Um,
last question to see whether you were planning to back up or not.
yeah, so I was reading the rules for it, and it does say on there, you're not meant to commit to any big ultras 5 weeks previous. So I think I'll just talk to Simone and just let her know what the deal is. And I mean, by 5 weeks after this event, I will have a fairly good idea of if I'll be feeling well or not, well enough to do it. So if I feel like 5 weeks from this event, if I feel like I could do 24 hours, then I'll use that as a good indicator. But yeah, like you just kind of never know with these events. So like Hurdies, even though like it only lasted 57 hours, but I was out running the next day, and I did the Ultra Perth, at a PB pace for 50 Ks not too long after that. So
Yeah. Well, Harvey Lewis has just finished Badwater, so
yeah. Um, Yeah, I think it would have been too soon for me to do an event now. I like to take my recovery a little bit longer. But yeah, I think 5 weeks recovery is kind of the minimum time that I would want to have.
yeah. Okay. Does anybody else have a question?
Hi, Phil. I'm just wondering, is there anything that you do, any one thing that you do that you believe keeps you injury-free through this process?
I wouldn't say I get out injury free. I did have a lot of inflammation in my tendon. And I actually had that towards the end of it, but it wasn't really an issue until the next day after I'd had a chance to relax and all that. And I actually had to take about a week, probably 8 or 9 days off of running just because of that tendon. But yeah, not a serious injury. And I think the biggest thing for me is I just get my body used to it through the training. Like my peak training weeks are 180 Ks. So yeah, and I build that up gradually as well. So I've kind of worked from that base of around 80 Ks, and I'll gradually build it to 180. And I'm just very in tune with my body. So I know if I'm kind of pushing it too much, I know to back it off.
Yeah.
And I think the backyards as well, it's kind of it's the race that's suited to, like, you want to be out there and conserving your energy. So because you get a lot of chance to walk and jog, and you don't need to run too fast. And I'm strategic with the parts of the course that I run and what I walk. So some of the parts of the course which are a bit more rough or technical, I make sure I walk those, because if you start running those, that's probably a bit where you may be prone to roll an ankle or something like that.
Right.
But yeah, I think mainly it just comes with experience and building up that body adaptation.
Yeah, thank you.
Who was the other person who had a question?
A lot of what you were saying about your planning around your events, it sounds to me like you need a PhD for that level of planning and all the spreadsheets and things. Have you always had that sort of analytical brain, or is that come with figuring things? I tend to wing my way through life and everything else. Have you learned along the way, or have you always been pretty good with planning?
This is probably the most organized aspect of my life, is ultra running. And yeah, particularly the backyards. Like before, like Hurdies, the first Hurdies I did in 2021, that was kind of the first race I'd gone into with a plan. Every other race before that, it was just like, okay, I'm going to run this marathon, and okay, this is the overall time I want. So break that down into 42 Ks, and this is my pace, and just kind of go out. But never really had any plan of, when I'm going to eat something or, things like that. It was just like, I'll just take, some gels or some jelly beans with me, and I'll, eat them when I get hungry. Or, but yeah, when I kind of got hooked on the backyard format, and I was like, I'm not going to win this on running alone. So what other areas can I improve on? And that's when I kind of came up with the plan. And now I've kind of transferred that to pretty much every other run that I do, whether it's, a 50K, you know, delirious or a 24-hour, I always have some sort of structure and plan to it. Obviously, like for the 50Ks, it's not, doesn't need to be a really detailed plan, but I still kind of know at what points I'm going to be eating my gels, and you know what sort of pace I'm going to start out with and what I'm going to finish with. And yeah, I think I'm probably more organized in my life now that I've kind of learned that this kind of structure and stuff does help. But I definitely don't come from an organized background or job or anything like that. So.
And has that been a sort of trial and error thing or research? How do you get to that point?
Yeah, it was just trial and error. So it just started off with Herdies. I just kind of wrote up a spreadsheet, and yeah, I didn't have any, like, this is when backyards are still quite new. Well, especially in Australia, they'd been in America for a while, but there wasn't really a lot of sort of resource material out there to look at and mimic and copy. So it just came down to me thinking, okay, you know, the backyard was easy to do because you're just breaking it down into that lap by lap. But like it's been refined over the years. So like my first plan, it'll just have like, okay, I'm going to have breakfast here, lunch here, dinner here, but I wouldn't say what I'm going to eat or anything like that. It was just kind of a reminder, okay, I need to eat food there. But now it's at the point where it's like, no, I'm having exactly this. And to the point where, you know, I label all my gels like this is lap 22, this is lap 34. And just number one, it makes it easier for my crew. But number two, I don't need to think about it. I don't need to come in and my crew's like, okay, what gel do you want? It's just like, here, have this gel. But at the same time, I'm not super rigid with it. So if I go, here, have this gel, and I'm like, you know what, I don't feel like that flavor, I can still go and grab another one. But yeah, Gabby's been really good as well with, so Gabby from Intense Eat Fit, with working with me and my plan. So basically I'll write up my plan of my pacing and all that, send it through to her, and then she can work out based on, she knows the foods that I like and kind of what sort of time I want to eat them. She can work out all the calories that I need for sort of that block. And so I know that she's done all the maths behind, you know, what I need calories wise and sodium wise and protein wise. So as long as I follow that plan, I know that I'm going to be ticking all the boxes. Hey.
So you've kind of answered, Simon's asked a question because he can't be here tonight. You kind of have answered bits of it. Like your plans are so structured and you're very organized all the way through. But when things start to not go to plan quite so much, like, you know, having to adjust and run with someone else, or if you were to ever feel a bit nauseous or something like that, like, how easy do you find it to cope and adjust and maybe change things slightly? And some of it might be mental and some of it might be physical, depending on what's going on. But, like, you know, how much have you relied on Gemma to sort of help you with some things versus just being able to mentally pull yourself out of any sort of negativity that you come across?
Yeah, that's a very good question, because I do believe a lot of my strength in these events is in my planning and my organization. So when things do sort of veer from it a bit, I can struggle a bit mentally. Like it didn't happen at this event, but in other events, you know, getting to that, even just the second night and the third night, I found it harder to keep those quick laps. So then I'm kind of getting paranoid. It's like, well, I can't keep up with that pace. So now my pace is slower and now I'm not getting enough sleep. So what flow on effect is that going to have? And I'm getting better at it, and just to the point where it's like, well, you know what, like my plan says I need to run at that pace and then have a sleep. But if I can't run at that pace, it doesn't matter. I'll still come in. And even if it's only a 5-minute sleep instead of a 10-minute sleep or 15-minute sleep, then, you know, I'm just going to follow the plan as closely as I can, and just try not to get caught up in the fact that it's not exactly like, yes, I'm not getting that exact 15 minutes that I've got on there, but you know what, that's okay. Like, so I'm definitely getting better at it. But yeah, it does definitely, yeah, it does throw me a bit if it's, yeah, if I'm starting to struggle in one area. But yeah, just, you know, these events go in waves as well. So, you know, if I'm having a down point and I'm not exactly following my plan, then I can, you know, the sun will come up, or I'll have a shower and I'll start feeling better, and I'll be able to catch up. In terms of the food on my plan, like sometimes I won't be able to eat something on there. So Gabby's been really good the last few events. So Herdy, she actually came down to the event for a few hours each day. With the masters, we had a group chat, and at the end of 12 hours, we'll just send a photo of the plan and send it to her. And she'd be able to look through and, you know, see what I've been eating, see if I've been sticking to it. And if there's something that's, you know, like I missed, like I couldn't eat the potato, for example, and then there was a gel that I was missing. I was just not having anything at all. So she's looking at that and she's, you know, modifying the plan for the next day and the next day based on the feedback that she's getting. So it's good that, you know, she can kind of adjust the plan in real time. And yeah, so I can kind of, yeah, change the plan to accommodate as I go. And that's, yeah. And Jen will do that a bit as well. Like if I'm, you know, for example, like I might have, so at Herdy's, I had a certain time that I wanted to have a shower, but then it didn't work out that was the best time to have it. So then, yeah, because I couldn't do the fast lap then, or what, I can't remember what it was. But anyway, we just ended up moving the shower to a different lap, and, you know, so I do have flexibility in my plan like that. And I think, like, I haven't really got to the point where, you know, I've had those bad stomach issues or something, then it's just kind of thrown the plan into complete disarray. It's always, I've might have had to break from it a little bit, but it's never like kind of being turned completely on its head.
My question is, how much further do you really think you could have gone? Like, you know, as the person who is always at the last person standing, you know, you're not, you know, you're not getting truly tested. You don't know how far you can go.
Yeah, it's weird because so at the end of the satellite chance, for example, I was done. I got to lap 76 and I was like, I'm so glad this is over because I do not want to do another lap. When I got to 76 laps at this one, it was completely different. I was like, I feel like, I think Laz has mentioned this before as well, but you kind of hit a point, and it was either on the third or the fourth day for me. I think it was kind of around that Australian record lap. And I kind of just hit a point where I just feel like this could almost go on indefinitely. Like I was feeling as good on day 3 as I was on day 1. And I'm thinking to myself, do they have to bring in a cap at some point? Like, if we just keep going, are they going to have to say, we're not allowing these events to go longer than a week? If you get to a week, that's it. And yeah, so even into the 5th day, you know, at the point where, you know, as I mentioned, Sam had been struggling, but then he'd picked up and talking about going to 120. In my head, I'm like, okay, well, I'm going to 121. So yeah, I do feel like I could have just kept going. Like I don't know what my limit was. The only thing that kind of had me a bit concerned was that tendon that I was talking about. So I was still running on it fine, but I could just feel it wasn't quite right. Like the next day it had all swollen up and it was horrible. So I think physically, like just in terms of general muscle soreness and in terms of mentally, I feel like I can keep going. I think the thing that will stop me is a physical injury or like a medical issue. Like if I start peeing blood or something like that, like one of those warning signs telling me I got to stop, then I will. Or, you know, if I've got a bone poking out or, you know, one of my muscles has snapped off of my leg, you know, that'll probably be what stops me.
Anybody else?
How does, like, your wife is amazing for all the support she gives you and stuff. How does she sleep? Like, what's her schedule like over the course of those 5 days?
Yeah. She does a little bit. So for this one, she was the only crew for like the first 36 hours. So I did actually schedule sleep in there for her. But my rule is she can't sleep when I'm sleeping. So because I don't want to miss the bell and, you know, be out of the race. So she there'll be a few laps at night where I don't need her help with anything, and I'm not, there's a lap there where I'm not going to sleep. So I'll let her kind of sleep in that period. And then during the day, I kind of try to roster her on for some sleep. But she's not very good at sticking to the plan. Well, number one, she finds it hard to sleep. And then, yeah, number two, she just kind of wants to be there and help. But once we had the second, like I had Nathan and Cassie turn up, they kind of took it in turns to have sleep. She'd sleep for maybe 2 or 3 hours at a time. But yeah, she still kind of finds it hard to just switch off. But yeah, it's something she's going to have to work on for Bigs, because we're only allowed one crew. So yeah, that's just something we'll have to work on. Hopefully we can kind of tag team with some other crews that are there. But we'll sort something out anyway.
How come you're only allowed one crew?
It's just a numbers thing, because there's 75 runners, and plus one crew each, so that's 150 people. And it's just on Laz's property, like he doesn't have a lot of space. And apparently they did trial it one year that you could tag team crews, like you could go off the property and someone else could come on. But then what will end up happening was, you know, that the next crew would come on without the other crew leaving, and just end up with too many people there. So he's just had a hard and fast rule that you can only have one crew. And that's, everyone's in the same boat though. So
yeah,
it's all equal and fair. But yeah, if I can team up with some of the guys from WA and that who are going over, we should be able to manage it.
cool.
Thanks so much, Phil. That was terrific to get that insight into not just your experience at Masters for while breaking that world record, but also in the lead up, you know, and really the last 4 years of running. It's fantastic, and I'm sure everybody here's learned a hell of a lot. So no, thank you very much.
Yeah, no dramas. Thanks for listening.